For the therapist. In his book, The Shrinking of America, Bernie Zilbergeld concludes that psychotherapy has only limited effectiveness for many of the problems that it purports to help. So, Bernie assesses that psychotherapy is very limited in the effectiveness for many, but not for all. But a review of outcome studies led him to find that psychotherapy does positively affect self-esteem, and that improved self-esteem may be counseling's most important outcome. And I believe that to be true because when you have high self-esteem, when you enjoy yourself, when you enjoy your life, when you enjoy your company, you have so much more strength and resilience against everything that happens in your life. So in my opinion, if this were only true, if it were only helpful for self-esteem, that would be a great change in our lives. Clients come to therapy wanting help with anxiety, depression, eating disorders, love problems, relationship difficulties, and a host of other symptoms. Sometimes the symptoms improve, sometimes they persist despite years of intensive work. But most clients do get a sense of greater personal worth from therapy. While specific symptoms may or may not change, clients at least begin to see themselves as more okay, more deserving, more capable. So, we as human beings, through therapy and through this inner work, get to see ourselves in a better light. Because I believe that in the end, everything is about how we perceive ourselves. I said before, rejection is always self-rejection. Acceptance is always self-acceptance. And enjoying oneself is a great thing. The problem with therapy is time. Over the course of months and often years, a client's self-perception changes in response to consistent positive regard from the therapist. So, the therapist here is our helper, the person that shows us the way. The sense of approval from an authority figure, particularly one who substitutes for the critical parent, has a potential to be enormously healing. So this component, that instead of a critical parent, we get an authority figure that gives us power and gives us hope, has the potential to be healing. Yet, this vital process of raising self-esteem, one that can change many aspects of a client's experience, is inefficiently and haphazardly implemented. Often the process takes far longer than it should. Okay, so we have some tricks and so some great ways to improve this process and to speed it up. Often it is done without a plan and without the specific interventions that could hasten its success. This book is about hastening the process. You can increase a client's self-esteem more rapidly and more effectively using the cognitive restructuring techniques presented here. Through an exploration of chronic negative self-talk, a systematic confrontation of cognitive distortions, and the development of a more accurate and compassionate self-evaluation, you can intervene directly to raise a client's sense of worth. So, in your life, when you go about your business, remember that changing negative self-talk with a positive self-talk and doing systematic work confronting negative distortions, because they happen to almost every one of us, and to develop a more accurate and compassionate self-evaluation. So how you see yourself, how you evaluate yourself, instead of having to evaluate yourself based on outer outcomes, you do that based on nothing, on yourself, or just on the fact of being. An issue of diagnosis. There are basically two kinds of self-esteem problems: situational and characterological. Low self-esteem that is situational tends to show up only in specific areas. For example, a person might have confidence in himself as a parent, a conversationalist, and a partner, but expect to fail in work situations. Someone else might feel socially inept, but see herself as a strong and capable professional. So, low self-esteem that is characterological usually has had roots in early experiences of abuse or abandonment. The sense of wrongness in this case is more global and tends to affect many areas of life. So in essence, you have something that is based on your how you see yourself as character. So like that you are defective or not good enough, or you may see yourself not good enough in some areas of your life. Maybe if you see yourself in those areas, and those areas are very crucial and important to you, then it might affect other areas of your life, and you would feel very low a lot of the times, you know. So situational low self-esteem is a problem ideally suited for cognitive restructuring techniques. The focus is on confronting cognitive distortions, emphasizing strengths over weaknesses, and developing specific skills for handling mistakes and criticism. Since the client is not rejecting himself or herself globally, you will find that changing maladaptive thinking patterns will significantly increase a sense of confidence and worth. On the other hand, characterological low self-esteem derives from a basic identity statement or a feeling of being bad. Changing a client's thoughts is not enough. You know, like if we feel that we are in essence broken, that we are not good enough, that we need something from the outside before we can feel good enough, that is not situational, it's based on rejecting ourselves. Identifying and beginning to control the internal critical voice will help, but will not entirely undo the feelings of wrongness. You know, you can defeat this critical part of you, but you will still feel that something is missing. So your mind therapeutic emphasis must be, therefore, on the negative identity that gives rise to negative thoughts. The focus should be on developing self-compassion and a commitment to non-judgment. Okay? So if you feel this way, we have to develop self-compassion, so a compassionate attitude toward yourself, and the commitment to no judgment. So you do not judge yourself. These positions can be reinforced through visualization and hypnotic techniques, which we will go over in the sequential chapters. So now we are at cognitive restructuring for self-esteem. Cognitive restructuring means that you use to change the way a thought is structured. So does the word restructuring. And the best place to begin is with the client's thoughts. Ask what he or she was thinking during a recent episode of self-reproach. Get as much detail as you can about the critical self-talk and then introduce the concept of the pathological critic. You can see the chapter of the pathological critic and disarming the critic. Encourage the client to develop his or her unique name for the critic as a way to begin to take ownership of the concept. Typical names are the bully, the shark, the kicker, Mr. Perfect, Marsha, the client's mother, and so on. Personifying the critic helps the client begin to externalize the self-accusing voice. You want him or her to experience the voice as something coming from the outside, rather than as a part of the normal flow of thoughts. It's easier to fight something that is perceived as external. It's also easier to make the critical voice ego dystonic, something the client eventually rejects as not me. So we take this critical self, the part of ourselves that we have inherited, we have taken from somewhere else, from our mother, parent, father, or even the place that we have been brought up, and we essentially externalize it and put it outside of ourselves, and we say essentially we don't need that anymore. We don't need that critical part of ourselves anymore. It doesn't serve any great purpose. Okay? So we put it out. And eventually you reject it. You reject the critic in yourself. At the same time that you are identifying and naming the pathological critic, you can also introduce the client to his or her healthy voice. The healthy voice is the client's ability to think realistically. By emphasizing and strengthening this ability, you are positioning the client to begin talking back to the critic. Names that are typically used for the healthy voice include my rational part, my accepting part, my compassionate part, my healthy coach, and so on. Choose a name that fits the client's self-concept. So, for example, rational, compassionate, caring, objective, and so on. By creating this dichotomy, so something that is on two parts, one in front of the other, between the critical voice and the healthy voice, you can encourage the client to comfort or to confront his or her critic. And here we have